Hello again and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today is the final in a series of 5 where I've been discussing all the different aspects of bullying. And today's YouTube video and accompanying blog post on my website www.traceymaxfield.com is about bullying with relation to children and teenagers with disabilities and special health needs, and also children and teenagers who identify as LGBTQ. My name is Tracey Maxfield. I'm a nurse, author, peer consultant, mental health and stop bullying educator and advocate. Before we begin, I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. Please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you just look below and then register with your email, and you will get notifications every Monday when my YouTube video and blog post is published. So let's begin. Now, we've reviewed that bullying usually occurs because a child or a teenager is perceived as being different. And I think the challenge is that growing up and developing into a teenager is difficult enough as it is. They need a lot of family and peer support. They need guidance, even though deep down they're striving to be an adult. And it's so difficult because you don't want to 100% show them the way. They have to find out lots about life themselves. However, you also don't want them to flounder and try and figure it out themselves. And when a child identifies as LGBTQ, I think that is a significant problem when it comes to bullying, because already they are being perceived as different, and depending on how the school actually deals with it, and even the community where the child or teenager lives in, they can be victims of some very nasty and very harsh forms of bullying. For example, in 2017 in the USA, they did a study, and it was called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And it's where they interviewed LGBTQ, and forgive me if I keep mixing it up. They interviewed teenagers, and they reported, and I'm actually going to read this. 10% reported that they had been threatened or injured with a weapon on school property. 33% were bullied on school property. 27% were cyberbullied. 23% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual students who had dated or went out with someone in the 12 months previous to the 2017 survey being conducted reported that they had experienced sexual dating violence. 18% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual students had experienced physical dating violence. 10% of LGBTQ admitted that they skipped school frequently because of safety concerns, and a whopping 90% of LGBTQ middle and high school students reported being physically and or verbally assaulted and harassed whilst at school. That is absolutely horrific and scary. And I think the challenge is that because as a child or a teenager, they're still trying to come to terms with their gender identity and their sexuality. And as they're trying to figure it out, then actually being victimized and harassed by peers and also others in the school environment, and then online via social media, actually is worse, because we know that bullying creates embarrassment, humiliation, and shame. And for some of these kids who are still trying to understand why they're different, they're not able to fully embrace the changes that they're going through because of what's happening to them with regards to the bullying. I think more than ever, children and teenagers are starting to feel empowered and want to identify that they are LGBTQ, or even that they are non-binary or have no specific gender. And to have the additional problem knowing that they're going to be outed and shamed and bullied and harassed, and it's cruel bullying, because as you know, even though there has been lots of progress in society, there are still many countries, and especially many states in the United States, and then within the states, many communities where there is still a lot of homophobia, there is still a lot of misinformation and confusion about LGBTQ, and they are looked upon very, very unkindly. And so what we do know is that the risk of bullying and victimization for a child or teenager who identifies as LGBTQ is 3 times higher than a child or teenager who does not identify as LGBTQ. And so you can imagine why ultimately so many LGBTQ students either drop out of school or actually become homeless, engage in risky behaviors such as drugs, alcohol, vaping, cigarette smoking, but they also engage in risky sexual behaviors. And with that comes the risk not only of sexually transmitted diseases, but also sexual physical violence. What we also know is that suicide is significantly higher in LGBTQ teenagers than it is amongst what we would classify as non-LGBTQ teenagers. And I don't want to say that normal, because really we don't have a standard for what is defined as normal behavior. And so I would like to continue to refer to it as just non-LGBTQ kids. So studies show that 1/3 of all gay youth have attempted to die by suicide. And it's really interesting, a couple of years ago in Minnesota, some Christian activists forced a measure through the school board forbidding the staff to discuss sexuality, homosexuality, gender assignments, etc. And consequently, in a 2-year period, 9 students died by suicide, 4 of whom were perceived as gay or who had actually come out and said that they were LGBTQ. And so again, it shows that the lack of support and education in the school system only exacerbates what these kids are going through. We know that LGBTQ teenagers who do not have a good family support system, do not have a good peer support system, and do not feel supported in school are twice as likely to experience depression. As I've just said, using drugs, alcohol, engaging in risky behavior. They're twice as likely to self-harm, so that's non-suicidal self-injury, cutting, gouging, etc. And so I think regardless of what your thoughts are on this, I think as a role model, as an adult, as a parent, as a teacher, we need to be compassionate and understanding to help these kids as they're starting to understand what they're going through, their feelings, their perceived differences. A lot of schools have now embraced this type of sex education and implemented strategies to combat not only sexual harassment of these kids, but also to try and reduce bullying. And some of the strategies that have been proven to be most effective is implementing non-discrimination and anti-bullying policies. And when they are strictly enforced and there is accountability and follow-up, students who are LGBTQ actually identify lower levels of harassment, assault, and homophobic abuse. Also, teachers and counsellors receiving training and professional development on appropriate interventions when homophobic abuse, harassment, teasing, etc. occurs, and research shows that when they deal with it immediately and there's clear explanation, the harassment stops. Other strategies, the development of GSAs, that's gay straight alliances, these clubs in schools. Obviously the students feel together, they do not feel that they're different, they feel supported. And because of the education that is then introduced into the schools about the GSAs, these kids are reporting that they feel more safe, they feel more welcome, and they have lower levels of victimization. So again, I can't stress how it's acceptance, non-judgment, education, support. We are all human beings. We all have unique and special gifts to offer the world, and we should be encouraging our children, our teenagers, to be the best that they can be. And then the final strategy that they found helpful was inclusion of LGBTQ role models and issues in the school curricula, including programs on bullying, prevention, prejudice, discrimination, cultural awareness, social programs, and resources available to those who were just wanted to know more or identified as LGBTQ, and also those with gender nonconformity issues. They didn't want to identify as a male or a female. And so it's allowing them that outlet to explore, to talk about, to assess and evaluate. Empowers kids. It's engage, educate, empower. Remember, that is my philosophy. And they feel better supported, better adjusted. It reduces the risk of developing a mental illness and suicide ideation significantly. So now let's go on to the second group who are victimized and bullied in school, and that is children, teenagers who either have a disability or have a special health need. So this could be a physical, a developmental, intellectual, emotional, sensory disability. This will all add to the challenges that they will deal with as they're going through school, as they're trying to navigate social situations in school and in life, and also developing relationships with peers and with adults. When you have one of these disabilities or a special health need, not only are they perceived as different, but to some they're perceived as an easy target, and that increases their automatic risk of being bullied, period. Because in many situations, it appears that they will be unable to fight back. Many of these kids may have difficulty getting around the school, may have trouble communicating, navigating social interactions, or they may show signs of emotional or cognitive distress. Think of kids who have spina bifida or cerebral palsy, ADHD, autism spectrum disorders, Tourette's. Imagine a child or a teenager with Tourette's, where there's uncontrollable and at times socially inappropriate verbal communication and phrases and tics, and they're unable to control it. It is a condition, and yet you can imagine if kids in the school do not understand and have not been provided education on how to deal with it and understand it, these kids can be subject to the most intense and horrible, cruel bullying. Other kids that will be perceived as different and have an increased likelihood of being bullied are those with special health needs. By that I mean epilepsy, so seizure activity, and also those with food allergies. And I think it's really important to mention food allergies, because there is a lot of education in schools about kids not bringing food because of peanut allergies, etc. But there was an incident in the United Kingdom back in the summer where a child who had a severe anaphylactic allergy to cheese actually died on the school premises because another student decided to taunt and tease him by throwing cheese at him, and the cheese actually made contact with his skin, and he had an anaphylactic reaction, and despite receiving 2 injections of epinephrine, he died. And so again, I cannot stress what may have been perceived as taunting or not really meaning any harm, or joking, fooling around as kids can be, resulted in death. And when the students were questioned, they said they didn't understand that even just touching cheese could have created such a response. And so again, it's stressing the need that there is accountability within the schools as well, and obviously with the parents, that education is brought into the classroom so these students, these teenagers, these kids understand that behavior is not acceptable, and it can actually lead to a severe medical crisis and even death. I think another important thing to remember is that if your child or a child or teenager is knowingly bullying a student with a disability, it is a civil rights violation and a public health violation. And so there could be significant legal implications, not only for the school, but also for the bully or bullies and their parents. And so with regards to special needs, I'm very, very sad to say that children with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, are bullied at a very, very high rate. Up to 63% of kids with ASD are bullied, and the bullying is direct bullying to cause harm, to trip them up, to embarrass them, but also to trigger an outburst, a response, a negative response. Others, ADHD, again, a very high likelihood of being bullied. Even deaf children are now reporting bullying. Even though they may not hear what is being said, they see what is happening, they interpret body language. The physical bullying, the tugging at the backpack, the stealing of the school lunch, etc. And so there's been a lot of research lately into the effects of bullying on children and teenagers who have a sensory disability. And so I think it's really important that we have to look at the whole gamut here of what illnesses, what conditions, what disabilities children and teenagers have. And we know that research is saying when they're integrated into a school with other students, that it is good. It enhances their confidence and self-worth and their coping skills, but it also is a learning opportunity and a gift for the other students to see that these kids are no different than them. They just have little perceived differences, but they still have skills and gifts and intelligence and can contribute not only to school life, but also to daily life. And I think this is what a lot of kids today are missing, that compassion, that respect, that understanding and acknowledging that we all have differences. Some are maybe more severe or more obvious than others, but that does not mean that it's an automatic license to exclude them, to harass them, to bully them, to intimidate them. It's just not acceptable. So with regards to how now are we going to address bullying? If you have, let's say in a school, you have a number of kids with special health needs or disabilities or neurological conditions, how do we help deal with bullying? So again, you must have that non-discrimination, adhere to the Civil Rights Act, and have a non-bullying policy standard. The second thing is start fostering peer relationships by providing upfront accurate information about the disorder, the supports and care that these kids need, strategies that'll help them maybe complete a task that a child can do more quickly, this child can do, but they will need ABC. It'll help the students develop empathy, compassion, and non-judgmental understanding about these perceived differences. Also create a buddy system. Peer support has been shown to significantly reduce the risk of being bullied, encouraging in-classroom learning activities, especially social learning activities, and then developing high-interest activities where every single person in the class has a role, maybe designing, assessing, evaluating, executing, participating, working together as a team for an end product also fosters support and peer relationships. And then it's facilitating teamwork where understanding, cooperation and inclusion are fostered and supported. And lots of schools have now introduced strategies into the classroom where they can participate in assisting and understanding the needs of others. So for example, one school has actually started doing wheelchair soccer nights, and where the students actually also, who maybe are able-bodied, get into wheelchairs to understand the nuances of what it is to negotiate a wheelchair and play soccer. Others do weekly get-togethers, so like on a Wednesday, they all sit together and have lunch, and they talk and share ideas, and then they can ask open questions of the student. So if a student has cerebral palsy or has Tourette's, how does it make you feel? What makes it feel worse? What can we do when you have an episode and you start saying all these horrible things or keep swearing? And I think it's helping them understand. Now, that doesn't mean that all this is going to stop bullying completely, but I think it will reduce bullying significantly. And if we can help, as I said, engage, educate and empower kids, the ones who are perceived as different will feel better, capable and more supported, and the other kids will feel that they're doing something good, and they have a better understanding that, you know what, we're all in this together. And so this concludes my final video and blog post on all the different types of bullying. In my next blog, which is going to be number 21, I'm going to be talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And not only am I going to talk about it with regard to children and teenagers who are now being diagnosed with this at alarming rates, but also in relation to adults, especially armed forces personnel, veterans, police, emergency responders. When you think of what's going on in the world and everything that we're all exposed to, PTSD is something that is astronomical globally. And so I'm going to take the holistic approach and talk about it from the very young to the very old. And so I hope you'll join me for that YouTube video, and please continue to check out my blog post, www.traceymaxfield.com.